Hi, and welcome to this short tutorial. Today we're painting two orange tulips that were on the intro to this video. I chose a reference photo with a simple silhouette, so it's easy to follow. This photo is from Pixabay, which is a free stock image website. I have to say they have really great photos of flowers, which are very usable as reference. So from that photo, I distilled the line art that I wanted using Photoshop. Both the Pixabay reference photo and the line art are available on the Google Drive link below. These are the materials that you'll be needing for the painting. This particular paper I'm using is a white ibis cold press. Personally, I find it a little too rough for a cold press, which should be medium grained, but it's still great quality paper. It'll just be harder to get clean edges since the paper texture will show. Okay, so let's get to your line art. A lot of people get intimidated by drawing. Since we're focusing on painting and laying out the colors, we can use this simple technique to help us save time with our line art. I print out my line art on cheap paper and trace it onto my watercolor paper with carbon paper. I like to use thinner paper for this guide so I have better control with the weight of my lines. The reason this is important is that it's very hard for watercolor to cover heavy pencil lines, so remember to trace lightly. You also don't need to trace every single line from your reference photo. Just the basic shapes will do. Since this is a simple image to trace, I didn't tape down my paper. You'll need to do that for bigger works in case you need to take a break while tracing. It'll also be easier to take a peek at how you're doing and to check if your line weights are okay. I like to put my reference photo where I can see it since I'll be referring to it constantly. I usually have my image load on my tablet or phone and prop it up on my workspace. Since everything's all set, let's get to painting. Let's start with our first petal. Slightly water down your warm yellow and fill in the shape. This way, when you add the deep orange accents, it will have something to flow on. Here I take a full strength of our bright orange and dab lightly where I see it on our reference photo. I'll be painting the petals alternately, making sure none of their sides are touching so that we can keep our edges defined. This petal isn't very saturated, so I used a watered down mix of my yellow and orange. I'm using a slightly bigger brush than I'm used to, and you'll see in this video that it's a bit hard to control the wetness of the brush. During our workshops, I find that controlling the water is a big challenge for beginners. Be careful not to load too much or too little water onto your paper. For the details, it's just a matter of using more and more of each pigment you see. I mixed in a little bit of my carmine since I'm seeing some hints of pink. I'm using a mix of orange and carmine for the folds and markings. Just layer on your paint in light strokes, following what you can see from your reference. Don't worry if you don't get the details exactly. It's very hard to paint a flower wrong. Since our first petal has dried a bit, I'm going back to define the details by adding more of the saturated orange. It's a good practice to look at your reference photo frequently. I probably do it every other stroke, just to have a really accurate guide for where you put your paint. For the shadows at the bottom, I used my blackish Perylene Green. Since all the other petals on this tulip are touching, let's move on to the other one. For this first layer, I used a watered down orange, then added my warm yellow on the tips. Next is my favorite part, using a full-strength mix of orange and carmine. I'll just lay it on where I can see them on the reference photo. I like it when the sides are soft, so if my first wash is already too dry for the second layer to flow softly, I just run over the edge lightly with a damp brush. So see, this yellow-orange edge is a bit too strong. I just run over it with a clean damp brush and it becomes soft again. So these are the basic techniques I use for the painting. I'll speed up the video as I go through each petal. I'm now going to add more definition with a smaller brush. I find since it has a smaller water load, the paint doesn't spread out too much and it can actually achieve cleaner edges even with rough paper. I'm glazing some parts with strong yellows and Perylene Green, again following how I see it from my reference. We're using a bit of color theory to make our deep shadows. Instead of using black, we're using a green shade that complements nicely with our red-orange. This way we don't deaden our colors. The final touches are the light green stems using pale Perylene Green. That's it for these two tulips. I hope you enjoyed following along and learned something new. Thanks for watching and see you again in the next video.